I spent 3 years in what I like to call the upside down. It felt like in this place, the harder I worked, the more I focused, the more I wanted what I wanted, the further away from it I got. And I have the most radical, surprising findings about why this happens and what works better instead. Today, I'm going to tell you about the 3 false gods that kept me stuck. And no, we're not talking about anything religious. I'm talking about the formulas, the tips, the tricks, the finish lines that we're taught to chase, especially in business and especially when things get hard. Here's what I discovered. False god number 1, the formula. Believing the tools are where the magic comes from. False god number 2, control. Treating your business or your body like a broken machine. And false god number 3, which might surprise you, the idea that money equals safety. This is a story about what really creates joy, safety, and growth, and why what worked once upon a time may not work this time. If you like videos that go into the seedy underbelly of the online space and try to reimagine what a human-first online business could look like, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. Let me rewind to when I first experienced an awakening. It would probably be as I was giving birth to my first baby. It was a natural hospital birth, and as I labored, I remember thinking, how has this body had so much power locked inside it that I didn't know about? Thus began a phase of incredible abundance and expansion and joy, which is ironic because on paper, it would have looked like nothing was working. My baby wasn't nursing properly and had lost a lot of weight. I was struggling to breastfeed. I had to pump every 4 hours, day and night. And my husband and I came face to face with all our unexamined assumptions about unpaid labor and shared expenses. But through it all, it was like every cell in my body was washed in gratitude. Like most women, all my life, I'd struggled with body image issues, right? I was always never thin enough, never muscular enough, never ripped enough. But now, postpartum, more than 25 pounds overweight, leaking milk, covered in stains, I felt this connection to and awe for my body that I had never experienced. When my father visited us 4 months postpartum and looked at me and said, you know, you really should lose your belly or you're never gonna lose it, I didn't get mad. Even though, technically, I probably should have. Because for the first time in my life, I was somehow able to hear what was underneath what he was saying, what he meant to say but didn't know how to. He said, you have a big belly. But what I heard was, you don't currently fit the beauty standards of our culture and I'm worried about how that's going to affect your life. I heard, I've always struggled with my own weight and so I find it hard to love you unconditionally when you look this way. I heard, I'm so vulnerable in my love for this new grandchild that I feel like I need to create some drama to normalize things. It was like unlocking a whole new way of being. I actually, in that moment, while he's saying something so insensitive to me, I felt closer to my dad than I had ever in my life. Which is strange because normally I'd have been so pissed, and rightly so. So here's what happened next. I did not take his advice. I just did my own thing. And I only started working out probably like 18 months later when my body actually felt ready. For the first time in my life, I was not trying to fix myself. I was not following a plan. I was present. I was listening. I was living from sufficiency. But here's the problem with spontaneous awakenings. We don't always know how we got there. And that brings me to false god number 1. A few years later, I had my second baby. This time, I wasn't patient. I was in a rush. I wanted to get back to my ripped size 6 self pronto. So I tried to recreate the magic with the same formula. High intensity interval training, paleo-ish eating, hustle, control. But this body needed something else. It also needed time. And I just refused to listen. The harder I tried to recreate the glory days, the more disconnected I got. And that's false god number 1, the formula. I thought it was the tools that unlocked me, the workouts, the diet plan, the control, the discipline. But really, it had been my deep presence and my absolute celebration of what I was living. The formula became my false god because it felt safer than trusting myself. What is it about following steps laid out by somebody else that makes it feel more rational, more safe, more smart? Listening to somebody else somehow feels safer than leaning into the unknown and allowing whatever wants to emerge to come to you. But here's what nobody tells you about formulas. They're innovation killers. They work great for execution, but when you need to pivot or adapt or heal, they become prisons. And of course, when the formula didn't work, I didn't question the formula, I questioned myself, which led me straight into the arms of false god number 2. So what did I do when my body didn't cooperate? I doubled down. I started eating clean, which really is just bullshit speak for I developed a borderline eating disorder called orthorexia at age 40 when I really should have known better. I spent way too much money on random supplements, and I hired a coach to train me for an ultra marathon because running a regular marathon is so $19.99. And when everything started to hurt, and when I got slower, despite clocking the hours and putting in the time, I trained even harder, ate even less, controlled more. And that's false god number 2, control. I was treating my body like a broken machine that just needed the right inputs and then was forced to create the right outputs. I wasn't listening, I was overriding. I was bullying my body instead of being in a healthy relationship with it. The more I optimized, the sicker I got. You know how David Goggins says, when you think you're done, you're only 30% done? Well, my body didn't think so. And by the time I was ready to listen, it was too late. I crashed. Hard, constant, systemic pain. I needed 3 naps a day just to function. But here's the silver lining about rock bottom. It gives you something unexpected. Time, space, and letting go of the pressure to control everything. We had to shut down our $2.4 million business. The week I laid off my team was the worst week of my life. I felt like the falsest of the false gods themselves. That collapse led me to discover the most seductive false god of all. For the next 2 years, we lived off savings. I would feel panic, like actual panic rise every time we had to spend $1 because I was like, it's running out and we don't have a plan. When all our other savings ran out, I had to break into our retirement account, which previously was unfathomable. And here's where it gets interesting, because when I took that action, somehow my lens shifted. Instead of experiencing the loss of it all, I switched to focusing on the runway that we actually had. Now, I acknowledge that having this runway is a privilege. But if you're sitting there and you're saying, well, Geeta, that's really lucky for you. At least you had retirement savings. You might be making the same mistake that I did, which is worshipping false god number 3. Money equals safety. I'm not pretending that having money is better than not having it. I've done it both ways. And it totally is. Having money is awesome. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I felt a lot less safe when I had a lot more money, because my sense of safety, my sense of agency and sufficiency had gotten all tangled up with my bank account, as if what was in my bank somehow said something about me as a person. And that was the problem. So when I unlocked our retirement savings, I stopped rushing. I didn't deny our financial reality. I cut every expense that I possibly could. But I also let myself feel the freedom that I had. And that's when the creativity came back. And that's when I remembered what sufficiency feels like. I'm going to be honest with you. The money hasn't magically reappeared, but it is trickling in. But more importantly, I feel grounded again, joyful, connected to the work. I'm not chasing $1 million year anymore. I'm chasing enoughness with options. And partly because the word sufficiency points to the core of that feeling that we're chasing when we think about abundance. I like the word sufficiency a lot more than abundance. And part of that is because the word abundance has been co-opted by this whole icky guru space. But part of it is because I feel that the word sufficiency points to that core emotion, that state that we're chasing when we think of the word abundance. Because what is abundance? It's more than enough. But our culture has brainwashed into thinking that the most important part of this equation is the more, but actually it lies in the enough, and that's what sufficiency points to. The false gods will always demand more control, more optimization, more money before you can feel safe. But real safety, real freedom, it comes from owning and celebrating and sharing what you already have. One simple way that I've taught our own kids to practice sufficiency is that anytime they feel delight or they receive something for free, I invite them to think about creating that feeling for somebody else. It doesn't mean returning the favor one for one. It means putting that energy back out into the world in whatever form that it might take. Think about what your business might look like if this was your marketing or outreach strategy. To conclude, if your plan isn't working anymore, you might not be failing. You might just be stuck worshiping false gods. Formulas that were never really the engine of your success. Control that's actually making you weaker. Or the belief that more money will finally make you feel safe. But what if what really worked was your presence, your patience, your willingness to work with your shadow? What if the real work was rebuilding your self-trust? The false gods promise certainty but deliver anxiety. Sufficiency offers something radically different. The idea that you might already have what you need, at least to take the next step. If this resonates, I'm building a body of work around how to build a business from this place of sufficiency without selling your soul. I run a community called the Clarity Collective, and it helps you build sufficiency into the lens through which you see the world. And it's just $9 a month. So if that's something you'd like to explore, there's a link in the description below. And if you want a taste of some of the concepts that I use in my consulting work and in the Clarity Collective, you can find that for free at messagingthatmakesmoney.com. I also have a newsletter called the 80/20 Entrepreneur, where I share concepts that would make videos like this one way too long. If you found this useful, please subscribe, like, and share this with somebody who is tired of optimizing their way to burnout.